Cloud. Hey everybody, my name is Pierre and I want to welcome you here to the Preeminent Sales Pro podcast. We're helping you to discover the mindsets, the means, and the mechanisms to become a preeminent sales pro. Now, what is a preeminent sales pro? What does preeminence even mean? Preeminence means, by definition, it means to be top of mind. It means to be in the forefront. It means being able to move out of the trap of being a commodity to being like a high valued sales pro within your space. And I have with me a preeminent sales pro. I call him Sales Yoda. The salesperson's Yoda. Patrick Galang. He's the founder of the Collective, which I think the best way to describe the Collective, it's just like a collab. I call you the founder and the chief facilitator of the Collective. It really is just a place designed to kind of foster the entrepreneurial spirit within sales pros. Because when you're in the sales game, you're pretty much at the mercy, at the whims of offers, right? Everything you do is alongside, not in the origin of. And so one of the things I really, really like about the Collective, and I'm sure we're going to get a chance to talk about some of those things today, is how to kind of move out of the trap of just moving month to month. Like there's a famous meme out there where it's just like it's a one with Johnny Depp and the little kid from Willy Wonka. And the guy's like, but I was the top sales pro last month. And it's like, it doesn't matter because the whole new month.
Yeah. So
And
true.
that's pretty much the lifestyle of pretty much every sales pro. You could be doing $200,000, $200,000, $1 million in sales the month before. But guess what happens the following month? The moment the first happens, you're back at zero again. And
Mm.
that roller coaster can be a bit of a detriment. So we're going to talk about some of those things, how to get out of that here in this podcast. But for those who don't know you, and just quickly introduce yourself, like how you got to this point.
Yeah. Thanks, Bear. Thanks for having us on. Pretty excited to chat to you. One of my favorite people to talk to.
Oh,
Um, it's I came into the space in 2019, coming off the back of basically an in-person offline role. I was at a company for 10 years and I was, I came into that as a cold caller and I worked my way through all the ranks to being the sales director and, shareholder of that business. And yeah, it was just time for a change for me. Didn't really know what to do. Kind
wait
of
a minute.
left and
So you're saying you kind of built up from cold calling on to being a shareholder in the same company?
yeah.
Wow.
I came in as an employee, as a cold caller,
Uh-huh.
trying to break into the finance industry
Uh-huh.
at the time. And yeah, it was, I'd done quite a bit of sales before that.
Uh-huh.
But I felt like, the finance industry was what I really wanted to get into at the time. And the only way to break in, because I didn't have any financial experience necessarily, had a little bit, but uh, the only way to get in was ground level, and ground level was
I
to
see.
be cold calling. And it not, some people refer to cold calling as calling old leads in databases. We literally would call the phone book.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. So I did that. I really enjoyed it. Gave me some great skills. I got to, because I did the grind more than most, I guess. During that period, I moved up fairly quickly and was, successful in those roles and kind of just stepped through, the ladders that was available to me at that time. And yeah, we ended up running like a 70-person team with 4 managers. So I was leading those guys and basically responsible for revenue for that company, and just needed a change.
Wow.
And kind of fell into the space through an old colleague of mine, and I got introduced, to what was high ticket. I had no idea about the high ticket space, and what it was what it was like coaching. I didn't even know you could get into coaching
You
in
could
that
do
way.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you
I
could do
think,
that. I mean, it was great.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't do it, but I want to kind of highlight this, man. Like, you started off cold calling the phone book. Like that's
Mm,
old school. Like, a lot of
old
people
school.
think that Cold calling is calling a lead list. No, that is outbound. You know, that's outbound. Cold calling is when it was like it's a generated list that has pretty much no information
Mm,
about you whatsoever, and you're calling like,
correct.
hey, this is me. It's like approaching a stranger in
Yes.
the street. Not like, you got a
Yes.
business card. This is like approaching a new person in the street and kind of like and
Totally.
kind of like
Yeah.
talking about this. So that's a completely different game. But even
Yes.
more important than that, it's just like it sounds like the steps were deliberate. And I think this is something that a lot of people miss when they come into the high ticket space is that they don't really give any new thought past this is the offer that I'm trying to get on. And I think this is something that you weave throughout the collective, the collective that we're in. It's just like you want to think about not just today, but you want to think about what you want to do later on as well. Right. So
Mm.
let me ask you this question, like for you, like what sparked has that been a trait you've always had, like developing the strategic thinking multiple moves ahead? Like are you like a chess prodigy in your spare time? Like how do you
No.
how do you how did you get involved in like strategic thinking, and like when did you start noticing the need for
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'd always done it, but not realized
it?
I'd been doing it. My first like proper sales role was in finance, well
Mm,
before this, that company that I was just talking about.
mhm,
Um, and it was as a mortgage consultant, there was like 7 people there, 6 people they were looking to hire, and because I didn't have experience, I was kind of the seventh person. I was
mm,
out, and I didn't have experience, so they said no. And I thought if
mm,
I could get into this, like I could really learn some skills from these people, so I offered to work for free.
mm,
And at the time, there was a 2-week onboarding period. The first week was about product. The second week was about actually generating, leads, and they had self-generated and also the company generated leads. And I thought, let me learn how to do that while everyone's trying to learn product, because
I remember that. I
yeah, if I
remember
can't sell
that.
to anyone, like what's the point of learning the product? And I made a couple of sales in my first week, and by the end of
This
that first
This is
week
before
training,
you were on
I got
board, if I'm
offered.
not mistaken, right?
Mm, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
If
So,
I remember if I'm thinking about the right post, I could be completely wrong. I haven't had my
mm.
breakfast yet. If I remember correctly, you were trying to get into the space, and they were offering the training, but it was like you and another guy, like you were generating leads before you even got on the offer itself, like before you even on
Mm,
board. It was there's a vague promise about like being hired by them or
mm.
something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I started thinking about, like, as I was, well, how I was going to make sales, because that was the main purpose of that particular role. Um,
That's good.
but I had no idea. I wasn't really planning, like trying to think ahead. It was just, how do I make money? How do I get into these places? And the more to sort of answer your question about strategic thinking, I probably got it more from investors, in terms of
Mm,
how they look for investments. The way that they analyze businesses is, and I wrote about it just the other day, maybe even today, about how they look for things that are built for the future. So,
mm,
there are things that are relevant now, but have you got a plan to be relevant in like 2 years, 3 years? And
wow.
that's the whole basis of being able to
Strategic thinking.
strategically think ahead. So, like, if most people listening to this are in sales, everyone's been living through this, because there'll be, an offer that you get on,
Mm,
absolutely crushing it. They have one offer, they have, maybe one channel, or they're looking at expanding to things.
mm,
And because the business is built for now and not the future,
mm,
one that now becomes either saturated, or the market adapts, or the market becomes more sophisticated, then the marketing starts to dry up, leads start to dry up, and then you're back in this. Well, you're at the bottom end of the roller coaster, and you're trying to either generate leads yourself, or they just don't generate enough leads that they have
mm,
to pivot, or work out a new marketing message,
right.
or maybe build the offer. So
Mm,
it's very reactionary, and that's why people fall into that ups and downs,
mm.
and then they get stuck.
Can
So,
you can you give us like I don't know if this is I know this is kind of a bit of on the spot, but like, can you
mm,
give us a crash course, from your experience of like how to know if a company or an offer or a business owner is future
Mm.
proof in their business? Like, are there some subtle signs to kind of look for, questions to ask?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. It was never the case, even like 18 months ago.
Hmm.
Before I started, I mean, I started my sales recruitment business
Hmm.
almost out of necessity because I was up in those ups and downs. I mean, the highs were really good,
Hmm.
but then the lows were, a little bit. It wasn't disastrous, but it was um,
It was
thought
not to
provoking enough.
remember.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if I don't sell or if I'm not on calls, I'm not making any money. So I had to
Right.
try to control that. And that's kind of
Mm.
how I future proof myself. Okay, if I get into
Mm.
this, what's going to happen next? And so I think with most offers, the founder is the key to it
Mm.
in terms of like how much they care, how not even how big their vision is, but what is the vision that they carry for the business.
Mm.
And if you run a simple question of, you know, is this particular offer going to be relevant in the next 1 to 2 years? I mean, that's a good starting point. I think that's a
Mm.
good starting point to go, okay, this particular, I don't know, I'll pick a random, this is a business coaching
Right.
offer.
Right.
Is this business coaching offer, the way that it's modeled, the way that the market is going, is it built to still be here in 12 months' time or in 2 years' time? And
Mm.
you just have to kind of see the trends and what's going on in the marketplace. How marketing is going at the moment in terms of, maybe people are going, VSL to booking or doing a lot of
Mm.
opt-ins.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like they start to
Yeah.
work their marketing for how it is now. But, if a company knows and it's in their vision to evolve over
Mm-hmm.
time, right? Okay, right now the VSLs are working really good, but we know at some point in time this might fatigue.
Right.
So we've got a plan in maybe 6 months' time between now and the next 6 months, that anyone that opts in, we've got a really cool nurture process,
Right.
right? That if this happens, this happens. Like I think
Yeah,
that's kind of what I
I
get
think it's
to.
a big point. I think it's a big point because the reality is I would say, um, to kind of add to the point would be like, um, look at how personal development works, right? Like when you're trying to grow and you're trying to mature, you're trying to change, like what would you typically do to make that work? Well, first of
Mm,
all, you take on some new courses. First of all, you identify a problem, right? You find some
yes.
resources that either online or whatever the case may be. You be joining some new courses and things like that, and then you be spending your time focusing in on putting in tactical, practical actions, to get from point A to point B. So
Wow.
I would say as a bit of an add-on to that would be just like paying attention to what the founder is doing. Like, are they reading? Are they improving themselves? Are they joining any masterminds? Are they talking about anything? Are they are they are they thinking ahead and bringing up to the team potential challenges and obstacles? Because the truth is, and I learned this from Brenda Bashar one time. He said the goal of the CEO, the goal of the founder, is creating and relating. Like that's his
Mm,
job. His
yes.
job is to think. And so the CEO, the founder is not thinking, then that can be a surefire sign this may not be around for quite some time.
Mm. That's true. That is so true.
Yeah,
And I've seen it.
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
You talk about business models a lot, even
Mm,
within the collective. Um,
yes.
could you just clarify what you mean by business models? Because some sales pros coming
Yes.
into the space may not have a clue what that is, and maybe it's like a bit of a buzzword for them. So could you kind of clarify what
Yes.
that means?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of ties into what we were talking about before, but when we say business models, it's the different ways to generate revenue in a
Mm.
business. That's really what it is. It's not so much that a business model is a coaching offer or anything like that, but uh, the coaching offer is the thing. The business
Mm.
model of it is that it makes money through low ticket offers or high ticket
Ah, I see.
masterminds, or do you know what I mean? Like business
That's
models, really,
clever.
it's the way that it generates revenue.
Mhm.
Um, so to sort of tie in with having an offer that evolves, you want to have a look at, okay, for right now they're solving problem A, and
Mhm.
as they solve that problem A, have they got anything to solve the problems that
Ah, I
happen to
see.
solve problem A?
Yeah.
after they've solved problem A, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where those upsells come into play, or
Mm.
maybe a done for you offer off the back of it,
Yeah.
or a membership into a community after they've done that
Mm-hmm.
first piece. So then there's the different business models
Mm-hmm.
within that actual business or within that actual offer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually what I refer to when I'm talking about business models. Is really
Right.
the way they generate revenue, and as it
That's
relates
good.
to being relevant in the future. If an offer has an offer that solves a problem now, but doesn't have an offer that solves a problem as they fix the original problem,
Mm-hmm.
then you know, well, a couple of things. You can look at it like, okay, this business is not built for the future. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
built for now, not the future.
Mm-hmm.
But I can contribute to building something in the future. So for me, if I identify that, I can become a high value sales professional, like you were saying, because I can bring these things to the table. So it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, you know, as long as it's a good offer, fulfillment's good. But is there an opportunity for, as a sales professional, be able
Mm-hmm.
to contribute in that way and be the catalyst for those things,
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Moose Reed, I did an interview with him, and he talked
Mm.
about this idea about salespeople, um, cross-selling and upselling and those kinds of things, and then bringing those
Yes.
opportunities. So, as a person who has spent a career like, talking to high-level business owners and founders and things like that, like how does a salesperson make that presentation to their respective business partner about, hey, there may be some potential opportunities to do X, Y, and Z. Like, how do they
Mm.
begin to make that preparation to make that presentation for them?
Yeah. Look, I think that's a great question. First things first, if you're going to negotiate on anything, it's as a sales professional inside that business,
Mm-hmm.
first you need to be good. I think that's kind of like the prerequisite, right? You can't be closing at 5% and saying, hey, I want to make these changes, I've got all these great ideas. So you got to not suck at first.
Definitely
I
not
think that's step one.
making the pitch to Elmer Fudd. It's terrible.
Yeah. So step one is you got to be good. And I
Right.
think if you've got results to then be able to back up your claims or back up your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
then it's an easier conversation
Mm-hmm.
to go with the thing. So uh, I think the best way to get that conversation started is by letting the business owners, well, you share with them your observations in terms of like what's
Okay.
happening with the leads, what's happening with the business right now, and also the observations of where the client journey is. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
probably the main thing to note.
Mm-hmm.
And as you explain the client journey, someone comes in through here, they go through, this piece, and then they go through fulfillment. I think everyone's having some great results. But I kind of see that what happens after, they go through that first part, like they sort of just drop off, or maybe you try to sell them into like a high-end mastermind, but it's too late. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like, I'm
Right.
finding that these clients are really excited in the first 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
of being in your program. Maybe that's a good time to start looking into something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you just start bringing that up. You start making those suggestions based on your observations,
Right.
and they'll either think about it, or they'll usually ask you, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you can back it up, because you've dealt with, your results are good and everything else, you don't have to be at top of the leaderboard, but if, as long as you're meeting or
Mm-hmm.
exceeding, what you're supposed to do, I think that's in itself is some credibility in
And
the
what you're
offer. So,
talking about, has a lot to do with just organic sales, to be fair. I
mm,
think it was Charles Munger who said that, learning without having something to hang your new learning, like a lattice to hang your new learning on, is futile. And so
mm,
for a lot of people, what he's talking about here is he's talking about what you would do even in an organic sales kind of situation, like you're making an organic ask, you DM setters out there, right? Is the
mm,
idea of complementing, bringing awareness to what is already working well, right? And then
yes.
moving from what is working well to maybe some potential problems or challenges that you may have seen as a result of being excellent in what you do, and then being offered the opportunity to be given the floor to make a suggestion or two about it. But the prerequisite of that is that you have to be excellent in your craft. You know,
Yeah.
I say this all the time on podcasts, which is like, um, you know, being mediocre is only an incremental improvement across the board. Like it's just like one step up. But when you
Mm.
can choose to be preeminent, when you can choose to be excellent, when you can choose to stand out at what you do, that thing scales exponentially. Like
Mm.
there's so many, it's like the Swiss Army knife. It's like the Swiss Army knife, like the cheat code in the universe, right? Because like,
Yeah.
you know, when people value, people want to be like people who
Mm.
are doing the things they want to do or achieving
Yep.
the results that they want to achieve. So if you're being excellent in what you're doing, you're able to kind of capitalize on that. There's no limit to what kind of like opportunities and suggestions that you can make.
Yeah.
But I wanna kind of go back a bit um to the strategic thinking right there, right?
Sure.
Because I think that a lot of people, and this is something you talk about a lot in the collective, they they think too much.
Yes. Yes.
And choose not to act. And for those of you who are not aware, like I've talked to many, many different kinds of people, and I've never seen someone implement as fast or as efficiently as Patrick does. Like there's like this running joke in our collect like this. Like, how does he do that? You know, like he's working with like this like a 19-year-old. Like we'll talk about that in a minute, but like he's working with a 19-year-old, like and the implementation of it is outstanding. It's like, holy crap. Okay. So it's like, so I want to talk about that. Like, what is the threshold? Like, how do you like? I remember you made a quote to us one time, which was it was something about a business mentor or something like that asked you, "What do you imagine you're doing differently now than you did back
Mm.
then?" I don't know if I'm quoting
Yes.
that right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, that's right.
Can you talk to him a bit
Yeah.
about that story?
Um, yeah. As a recovering overthinker, I think that's I can speak to it. I had so many business ideas that
Right.
took me I don't know a long time to implement. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it, and there's different fears on why you do that, why you overthink, and it's
Mm-hmm.
again it's different for everyone. But for me, I think I just didn't want to fail. I didn't want the feeling of failing,
Mm-hmm.
um, that I would get judged if I failed.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, from past childhood experience or something, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
But that's for me personally. That's kind of what causes me to overthink. It's like, oh, how am I going to get viewed if I, like, is my reputation going to be ruined if I do this? People are going to think I'm a bit flaky if I'm just, like launching these things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so getting comfortable with that piece, I think, helps a lot. With
Mm-hmm.
especially with the overthinking. But to your point with what you're saying, um, the biggest difference between myself and what most people who have brilliant ideas is I just do things faster, and I don't really have I guess a fear of failure, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I've failed so many times that, like, this has become kind of normal. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm smart enough to, pick it back up or recover on things, or, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel
Right.
like I've got that core skill. And I think if you have
Mm-hmm.
that belief that if you do something and it doesn't work out, you just move on to the
Right.
next thing. Um, but I think it's in if you're overthinking a lot of things, the best way to validate what you're thinking about is to test it. You
Mm.
know, it's like, if you look at, as a child, we kind of do things, like the hot stove. There's an example of the hot stove.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
if it's hot, you put your hand on it,
Right.
and then it kind of burns you. Do it again. Some people look at that
Unless
hot
you're a
stove and
rebel,
yeah, unless you just go on the thing, right? And it
tell
just,
me what to do.
yeah, I'll burn my palm real hard. You know,
Right.
um, as a child, you just kind of do it. You learn, and you go, okay, I'm not going to put my hand there. But
Mhm,
it's like, as you get older, you look at a hot stove and you go, that's really hot, but I kind of want to
mm,
touch it. I
mm.
think it's going to be hot. I want to know what the feeling's like to touch it. I know it's going to burn, and they
Exactly.
just keep looking at it. Um, to a point where someone says, "Yeah, don't touch it; it's hot," right? And then you forget about it. It's like, okay, that's hot. That's fine. But
Right.
in a lot of cases, you know, if as an adult, you can touch it and pull your hand back to not get burnt, right? To know that it's hot.
Instead of putting your whole
Um,
palm on it.
Instead of putting your whole palm on it, you can just touch it and go, "Oh, I tested that. That's hot. I'm not going to do that again." And you just
Exactly.
move on.
Exactly right.
So I think for where most people get stuck in the overthinking is that they overthink on their own. Right. So then they create that reality that it's bigger than what it is, or it's worse than it is, or the things that can happen is really negative. And it's only every now and then that a positive thought goes, well, if I could actually do it, if I'm right in thinking that I should be doing this, or, I should be making this move, like something good can come of it, But unfortunately, we know that sometimes the more negative thoughts are heavier than the more positive ones. And that's where I guess community comes in to help you validate, to get you over that hump of, hey, I'm thinking about these things. I'm hanging on to it a little bit too long. I'm getting a little bit too attached to it. Detach from it, test it. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, then,
Move
we'll
on to
cheer
something
you on
else.
the next thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's such a strength in being around a group of people who are trying and failing, but also trying and succeeding and doing incredibly well.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's this idea about you can't edit thoughts in your mind, right? You can only edit things out in the real world, and this is with a lot of you guys who are dealing with like your own thoughts, like self doubt and criticism, and a whole lot of other things. Some of the best things you can do is just kind of get those things out and put them out into the world. Maybe not create like a public journal,
Keep
but
that
like
to yourself.
keep that to yourself, but like getting these things out of like this invisible, ethereal realm, and like to put it out into something, whether this is an idea, giving it your first test, whether this is a thought, putting it out on paper, doing something to move it from intangible to tangible, compressing that time. As a matter of fact,
Totally.
one of the ways in which I found that you can tell how much growth you have is to determine how long it takes you to move from an idea to implementation. The longer it
Yes.
takes, the more problems the more things you have to overcome mentally to kind of get it going. So you want to kind of
Yes.
train yourself to compress the amount of time it takes you to go from here's a great idea to here's the first iteration of this. You're Mach 1 for you Tony Stark fans out there, right?
Yes. Yeah, totally.
I know you said you're a recovering chronic overthinker.
Yeah.
Can you think of a project or something in the past that really kind of nailed down the importance of like taking more action instead of maybe thinking more?
Yeah. Sometimes when you have to take action, there's a position where you have to take action, you got no choice. Like you can't think about it, you just got to do it. Usually when you're in danger, fight or flight, you
Running
don't
from
have a
Freddy
choice.
Krueger and the like.
Yeah. Like you just have to do, right. So there's that. But I think, sort of in stages. I mean, the collective itself, when I launched it on the 1st of January, I probably had 7 days thinking about it. But in April 2023, I did put something together that I launched and tested, and I didn't like it, so I put it aside. And I think, at that time, I probably started thinking too much of, it needs to be this, it needs to be great, it needs to be all. So I parked it, like I just kind of left it for a while, and a few good encounters, a few good conversations, sort of enlightening the things that I was already doing that was actually quite valuable, JV partnerships, equity deals, things like that, made me realize that, hey, I've already got all of these things. Like I've already been doing it. I just haven't been sharing it. So, is this worth sharing? Well, let me test it. And that's kind of where, in that particular scenario, it's like within sort of 7 days, I made that market research post, and it's like, okay, I'll just do it and then see what happens. So, like that's a particular circumstance where, I'd thought about something, it went a bit too long, and then I just cut the time frame of it, back December, January. But
okay.
If I can sort of share like a bit of a process, I guess,
Yes.
that I think about, where
Yes.
if we're going to have like these negative thoughts, right? Overthinking, imposter syndrome,
Mm.
self-worth, like all those things, right? If
All the
you
baggage.
can't, yeah, exactly the whole thing. I think if you try to figure out what's wrong with you, in those different stages, like you're
Mm.
definitely going to get stuck, right? Think, how do I think
Absolutely.
outside my circle? How do I get out of my comfort zone? So I kind of there's I just deal with it in different stages, right? This is
Mm.
kind of how I've looked at it. There's different stages. So the first part is the overthinking. Should
Mm.
I do something? Right? Should I do something? And as long as you can, every time you ask that question, should I do something? Well, the answer is always yes, right? Like, should I do something? Yes,
That's your next
because
question is yes too.
yeah. So then you go from overthinking. So if you get out of the overthinking phase, then
Mhm.
you end up in the imposter syndrome phase.
Mm.
Like, should I do something? Yes. Okay, it's happening now. Then you go, man, am I the person to be doing this thing?
Yep.
Then you got imposter syndrome, right?
Mhm.
So then that part kicks in. So if you're aware of, okay, overthinking, you just take action and that's fine. Then imposter syndrome, you go, man, am I the person to be doing this? I think that one's a really easy one because you just have to be grateful for where you're at the time.
Mm.
That's kind of how I deal with it. It's like, how lucky am I that I'm able to do this thing?
I
Right? That people
see.
are actually listening to me. And so you overcome that fairly quickly. This is kind of like the system,
Mm.
overthinking. Should I do it? Yes. Okay. You move past that. Really simple. Am I the person to be doing this? Well, yes, I'm grateful that I can actually do it. Even if I'm not as experienced or whatever it is, but you're able to do it, right? So that's
Mhm.
that's a good thing. And then the other part, the kind of like the third piece to that is when you realize that the overthinking and the imposter syndrome puts you in or puts you outside of your comfort zone because that's what it's doing.
Mhm.
Then you have this realization that you're actually on the path of growth,
Mm.
right? So you get past the first piece, you get into imposter syndrome. It means that you're challenged outside of your comfort zone, but not too far outside your comfort zone that you're freaking out. Just far enough that you have that little bit of growth. You know what I mean? So it doesn't paralyze you into the next part and the next piece. And I talk to a lot of really successful founders, and that's kind of their process that they do. Like the biggest businesses where they built multi-million dollar, multi nine-figure businesses. It's
Mm.
like their ideas came because, hey, I don't like this. I'm going to try to fix it. Really
Wow.
simple. And instead of, okay, so how do I fix it? Do I put this piece, this piece? They go, I'm just going to try to fix it, and that they just
Mm.
get overcome the overthinking phase real quick.
Mm.
And then they go, am I built, am I ready to build a business like this?
I see.
Um, they just plow forward anyway. You know what I mean? Like, am I the person to do this? Yeah, I'm the person to do this. It's my own problem that I'm trying to fix.
Yes.
So, and then they get past that really easy. And yeah, before you know it, you're just outside of your comfort zone that, uh, as we say, being in that zone, that's kind of where the growth happens, right? So,
Yep.
um,
Tim
yeah, that's
Ferriss
kind
talks about this a lot. Like when
of,
he did a podcast talking about building the Tim Ferriss podcast and then his whole like little brand that he has going on now. Little brand is massive, massive brand, right? Is
yeah.
and one of the things he talked about, he said, if you're gonna build to last, one of the first kind of ingredients is kind of scratching your own itch.
Mm,
And a lot of people,
yeah.
and I know Dan Co talks about this a lot too, which is like, even with your content and your personal branding, you're kind of speaking to essentially like three kinds of people: you in the past, you in the present, you in the future.
Hmm.
Very, very
Yeah.
interesting thing like that. And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
to kind of go back to something you mentioned a bit earlier, it's like, that you're hitting the boundaries of your comfort zone when you're hitting the overthinking
Mm,
and the imposter syndrome, right?
yeah.
The boundaries of who you are now is those two things. It's like, oh, should I be doing it? Should I be taking an action? The answer, of course, probably is yes. And then, I like the hack of like just being grateful. The fact that you have the idea is an indication that you have the skills, the talents, and the resources necessary to execute. You can
Yeah.
only see problems that you have the capacity to solve.
Yeah.
All right. That's a
Yeah.
huge, huge
Great
thing for
point.
me. It's
That's
just
a huge
like
thing.
you only see problems that you have the capacity to solve. I used to use this analogy on sales calls a lot, which was let's say you take a sick person, you put them in a room,
Mm.
and then you take a board certified doctor, right? I don't know if there's such a thing as like a board certified doctor, right? Maybe that's a dentist. I don't know. And then you take like the cashier from McDonald's, and you put them
Mm.
in a room, and you ask them, you give them 30 minutes to evaluate what exactly is wrong with the person. Who's going to have more insights, the doctor or the cashier from McDonald's? Well, chances are, unless the person's like morbidly obese, right, and they've been visiting McDonald's, the doctor is going to be the one that has the most insight. So, be assured that you guys, like, if you're out there and you're seeing things and you start developing this, then they could solve this or they do X, Y, and Z. Guess who's responsible for making that happen? It'll be you,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I can't stress how many programs and courses and resources that are like coming out as a result of the collective and even beyond that are direct that they're seeing lives change because they decided to sit down and solve the problem that they saw. Very,
Mm.
very interesting point there. But I
Yeah.
want to ask you about this too. Um, because I know that I've gotten a chance to look at some of the podcasts you do, and one of the things that you talk about a lot is content creation and personal branding. But what I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you is like, is there a such thing as trying to personal brand too soon?
Don't think so.
You don't
I
think
think
so?
it's yeah. I think personal branding is an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think because it's personal branding, uh, it's probably leaning now anyway, leaning more towards marketing than just personal branding.
Okay.
It's kind of what I noticed for a little bit of time. Um, I think personal branding in itself is like sharing your identity and your
Mm-hmm.
evolution as a person. I think that's if you, especially like to your point, like should you start early? Yeah, totally, because that's what makes your brand really unique. You know, so whenever someone asks me about personal branding and what I think of it, I think it's just sharing like your values and the things, and maybe when you start it too late, I think you have a certain identity that you want to stick to because
Mm,
that's what you become known for, maybe
mhm,
not publicly, but privately. So you have to try to stick to like a persona,
mhm,
which then you lose the authenticity of it. And it's like a buzzword, authenticity, whatever. But you kind of lose like you more than anything inside of it. Um, but I think if you're like, I mean, the best way to get started on the personal brand side of things is just to document your journey because it's your journey, right? It's no
mm,
one else's.
mm,
Um, and I've seen a lot of people try to, not just sales professionals, but other entrepreneurs, they try to build a personal brand, but they sound like someone else. You know what I mean? Someone else on YouTube, or this guy's coming up on YouTube, or like Alex Almosi says this, and like
mm,
all that's they try to associate themselves with that personal brand because it's either the framework that they're following, or whatever it is, right? That
mm.
they're following strategies, and I think yeah, they kind of lose themselves in someone else's personal
Kind of
brand.
framework. But
Yeah,
could it be the fact that, they just haven't figured out who they are yet? And so they're copying those other people?
yeah, yeah. I think you still do you can benefit from using the frameworks. I know
Hmm.
I use frameworks of other content creators,
That's the
but
difference though, isn't it? That's the
mm,
difference between using someone's framework and trying to
mm,
imitate their personality.
correct. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think that there's a big difference between that distinction between those two.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I think if you're you know documenting your journey, you're giving your own opinion based on hey, this framework is great, I use it,
Hmm.
but I kind of try to do it based on these things that I'm interested in, or these things that
Hmm.
I like, or the way that I talk, or
Yes.
I think that's more genuine
Yes.
in terms of like value for me is like,
Hmm.
wow, like for you, Pierre, I mean, this is a shout out for you. Your storytelling capabilities is really good, right? Like it's exceptional because you always add your flavor to things that you reference, right?
Ah, I
Or
see.
things that you're reminded of. So to me, I every time you quote something, or you bring an example, analogy, or a metaphor, whatever it is, I feel like you've filtered that information to deliver it
Hmm.
in the Piere version. Does that
Very
make
true.
sense?
Very true.
So that's why I think
That
from
makes
your
sense.
storytelling capabilities, you can reference and back up what you're saying, but from someone else, but through your lens, right?
Mm,
So I know it's been through your filter
mhm.
or already, and you've got a library of it in you know what I mean? So that's what I think of personal branding. Someone new in the space. There's certain things. I mean, like I personally wouldn't share in a journey,
Mhm.
um, but as I'm trying to kind of figure out,
Can you
okay,
give me an
where do I
example of what you
sit?
mean by that? There's certain things you
You know,
wouldn't share,
yeah. I mean, look, there's probably some things. Um,
like a broad, so like things that probably
yeah,
wouldn't shouldn't share.
yeah. There's just some like this is me personally. There's some
Okay,
life things that you know, maybe like family stuff that I don't necessarily share, just to kind of
I
you
see.
know, keep those things a little bit separate. There's some things that I'll share, but um, I don't always share like the real vulnerable
I see.
stories necessarily.
Transparency,
I
like
always try
that.
to share,
Hmm.
yeah, lessons and how it can relate to somebody else. I think some of the
Mm,
vulnerable posts that I see, they're vulnerable on purpose.
mm.
You know what I mean? It's to get, I don't know if
Tactical
it's
vulnerability.
sympathy. Yeah, yeah. So I tend not to do those types.
Hmm.
I always kind of attach a lesson to it, or if I'm documenting a piece, I'll just say, look, I tried this, it didn't really work, so I'm going to move on to these
Yeah.
things. Yeah, some of the vulnerable posts is kind of like woe is me type of vibe to it. You know what I mean?
Today I
But
crashed
look at
into a wall and look at me now. No, it's
yeah,
like
look at
no.
me now. I just crushed it. You know? Yeah. So it's a bit of that vibe, I guess. But try not to try not to do that.
And
Yeah.
that's a big lesson. It's just like, a lot of people I've heard people try to describe like doing social media like a personal diary, like a public diary. But that's I don't think of it like that in that
Mm,
way. I think it like a a conversationally professional diary,
mm,
right? I think it'll be
yeah.
a better way to do it. It's like I'm sharing professional things in a conversational way with real
Mm,
life examples. I think that's a completely different thing than like
yeah.
woke up and I feel like complete garbage, and then but I decided I just go ahead and soldier on because today is today. No.
Yeah, exactly. I said I felt like that too, man. Like what value are you adding? Like
Yeah, like I'm glad did you take some vitamins or something? I don't know. It's like it's like there's a difference. There's a difference to doing that. Like what you're essentially trying to create is like you're trying to create the highlights of your personal journey to get from point A to point B. And there are three kind of like models that you can kind of speak from, right? The perspective of the student, the researcher, or the expert, right?
Mm,
And
yeah.
depending upon where you are in your journey, you could be playing multiple roles at the same time. There could be things that you have done that built, run, and tested to work for you. Other things you're still researching, other things you're still playing around with and getting feedback on. So depending upon where you are on your journey, you may be doing all three of them, or maybe it's one or two of them, right?
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, like in terms of like, building getting to a point where you're able to build something new, build something from scratch, kind of take a step out of like the 9 to 5 grind, the 9 to 5 grind of sales calls, that is, right?
Yeah.
Like when did you, because I know you built the collective for that purpose, but like, what made you decide to build the collective? Like actually go to a point where you actually building a whole community around
Mm,
this idea.
yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of things, couple of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, I salespeople are like my tribe, so to speak. It's
Mm-hmm.
my background. It's who I relate to the most.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've just been in a lot of communities where the conversation was pretty much the same
Mm-hmm.
around sales. Like it was always about sales or sales training, getting better at closing, which is cool. I think you need that as
Mm-hmm.
well. But in my journey to trying to figure out like how do I get out of sales call so I build something for the future so I can future proof
Future
myself,
proofing. There we go.
like how do I do that? There's no real pathway. I could go sales management. There's, we talked about like linear pathways and then the non-linear pathways, but no one's really talking about those things. And I thought it'd be cool to have that type of community where, again, this is, if you're thinking about future proofing the collective itself,
Mhm.
and I've said this to everyone who's come in, it's like these are the conversations that we're having right now, but
Mhm.
in 12 months' time, the goal is to have different conversations,
Completely.
solving bigger problems, solving different problems at that time,
Mhm.
so we stay relevant. And I just wanted to have a community of people that that I could bounce ideas off.
Mm.
Um, that was kind of the main purpose of it, is to share some of the different things and see if they're interested in it.
Mhm.
And maybe they're thinking along the same lines of they don't want to be on on commission only sales calls forever. That was the initial thing. Like, how many people can I have those conversations with? So that was kind of the intent behind it, and I really liked a business model that it was created for millionaires and billionaires. Right? There's
Mm.
a business called Tiger 21. And from Tiger 21, there's a community business called Chief.com for women executives. And these are like $1 billion companies. And I was
Mm.
really interested in how can I, and this is more the fun side of it. How can I create, how can I recreate and remodel that in, with the niche of salespeople? That was,
Mm.
that was kind of the challenge side of it.
Okay.
So yeah, those things, they're the main reasons why I created it in
Yeah.
the first place. And I kind of just ran with it. I didn't have like I said, the future proof vision and plan is to make this community non-salesy,
Mm.
as like in terms of like sales training. I didn't want it to be a coaching program because there's plenty of coaching programs out there.
Mhm.
And I wanted to learn from my peers. So that's where it's that peer-to-peer knowledge share
Mhm.
came into it, because
Mhm.
these are the business models. That's what they built their business model from. So, if millionaires, billionaires, and high level people are masterminding in that way, like, why couldn't we bring that into here? And that's
Mm.
what I really liked about it. So, those are the differences that I wanted to make in building the collective. Um, and I kind of just ran with it, like in the classic, do before you think.
Mhm.
Just started doing it, and then I
Mm.
started thinking about it. And as you've seen, like, we made a couple of iterations, and I'm like, oh, I don't really like this, or this sucks. Like, get rid of this. Let's move to this, and kind of like just evolved with the people, and myself too. Like, as I've
Can
evolved,
can you
along the way.
think of like for a person who's out there who is, they're listening to our conversation and like, I wanna start thinking outside the box. I wanna kind of start, focusing on maybe like expanding my breadth of knowledge. Like, what
Mm,
are some things that they could be studying or reading, or maybe, podcasts or, videos they could be watching to kind of
yeah,
start getting them the source material they'll need to kind of start thinking bigger?
yeah. Well, listening to Pre-Eminent podcast is the first one.
Shout
If you
out.
listen, shout out to you. Yeah. So listening to conversations like this, I think is good.
I know you had mentioned
Um,
like connecting with people outside your network, out of your little circle of
yeah,
salespeople.
that's probably the biggest one. The things, I mean, me personally, when I look at things outside of sales,
Hmm.
I think of people building big businesses. So
Mm.
one of my favorite podcasts is My First Million.
Mm.
A couple of guys who have exited businesses, online businesses in the past. So
Huh.
that gets me thinking a little bit outside of the box, because
Uh-huh.
that's kind of the topic of conversation for them.
What a cool
Um,
title. Well, I like that.
yeah,
My first million.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Although although the guys that they talk to are like worth nine figures, or so they're way past their first million. It's like my 100th million. That's probably what what I mean. That's probably what it should be called.
Well, it should have been.
Um, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's funny. That's true. That's
So,
true.
so like those guys get me thinking big for sure. And then there's like certain personal brands outside of coaching that I like to
Mm.
follow. Not because of the topic that they're talking about, but just their personality, how they come across, how they share their ideas.
Right.
Um, so there's a couple of people. One of them is, I think he's five-time Mr. Olympia, Chris Bumstead.
Mm.
I like his style and how he goes about his work. Um, physically, that's kind of what he's building, is obviously his physique and the
Mm,
dedication that he has for that, but also he's a family man. So you kind
yep.
of get to see that side of it. I like those types of influencers, I guess, that's a bit
Yep.
outside of the business space, just so I
Hmm.
can get a different perspective. You know, um, they're usually, those types of influencers usually direct to consumer, so they have a
Yes.
different angle on things as
Yeah.
well. And then I follow a few venture capitalists
Mm.
that they're talking about big business and big ideas, and although I don't necessarily want to go down that route, uh, if I'm around that knowledge, all the things that's in front of me seem like pretty small and,
Mm.
and easier to implement.
Context is king. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need the perspective to say, "Oh, this is not as bad as I thought
Mm,
it really was." I mean, like even when I started
yeah.
this podcast, I think I posted about this one time on social media. It's just like I was going through this little kind of like thought loop of like, who am I to do this and should I do this and maybe, am I gonna get too busy? And what I did was I found the comfort of being in the collective. I remember when I first started talking about the podcast in the collective, I was actually feeling like, man, maybe I should do this, and maybe I'm doing too much. And I remember making a statement. Now, this is really just funny for me. I remember making this statement, and I said, yeah, I just wanna make sure that I'm not doing too much too soon. And I remember watching you now. I said, yeah, that is important. And that was all you said. Like, yep, that is an important thing, but you're not there yet.
I don't remember.
And I remember getting out the call, I was like, maybe it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
And look at the lineup that you've got. It's
Yeah,
amazing. It's
yeah.
so good.
It really is weird. It's gotten to a point now that, I received the first person who reached out to me asking to be on this podcast. I was like,
Oh wow,
oh, that's cool. And
that's
then
cool.
I was DMing somebody. And I didn't even, all I did was mention that I had a podcast, and they were like, "Oh, do you have a calendar link? I'd like to be on that." I'm like, "Oh, like, well,
You're
oh,
invited.
yeah." And it was somebody who I really, really respected. I was asking him a question about something completely different, and he was like, "Yeah, do you have a calendar link?" And I was like, "Oh, sure."
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is another thing. It's just like, sometimes you just need the perception of like this is really not that big. It's not as
Mm,
bad as you think it is. And I think it's because of the fact when you're used to operating a certain way. Such like as a sales pro, you're used to, following up with leads, calling, closing, whatever that is. And then you start playing with the idea of doing something bigger, you think that you're now going to be overwhelmed when it's like, oh, this is
mm.
just a normal part of this is a normal day at the office. And seeing someone not just say that, but kind of model that for you in front of you, like this is how things are. This is just what we do now. My
Mm.
David
Yeah,
Goggins,
yeah,
right? This is just what we do now, Pierre. This is what we do
yeah,
now.
absolutely. And if I can share something,
Sure.
it's like classic. One of my favorite lines,
Hmm.
listening to Eli Wild,
Mm,
um, and he uses this on sales calls to get some clarity on things.
hmm.
Um, but going on overthinking and having problems and all those, making things bigger than what they are. There's a simple question that he asks: "How do you know?" You know,
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
this
How do
this
you
is going to
know?
be hard. How do you know? I don't know if I can do this. How do you know? Like, is it
So good.
experience, or have you tried it before? It's like, how do you know I can't? Yeah, I can't jump like a meter high. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, if people asking that, if you put in the work or whatever it is, and sometimes like in a sales call, saying, I don't know if I've got time to be able to commit to this. I don't know if I
Hmm.
can get the result. Well, how do you know? It's like, I think if you
how,
ask
how
that
do you
of
know that?
yourself,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there could be valid reasons, and whatever it is, limitations that's physical or
Mm,
mental, whatever it is. But I think if you just normally just ask that every anytime that you're in doubt, or you think, I don't know if I this can happen, or I don't know if I can make this thing work. Well, it's just like, yeah, how do you know? How do you know?
mhm, mhm,
How are things different now to when if you've had a bad experience in the past? How do you know that this experience is going to be different? How do you know that you didn't grow in that time frame? So I think those
Hmm.
things are really, really crucial. That's one of my favorites things to ask.
Absolutely. What are some of your favorite ways you've seen sales pros step out of their comfort zone and maybe do something outside of sales?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a podcast by Stephen Bartlett. It's called The Diary of a CEO.
Ah,
Uh,
yes.
and and in it, he had in one of the episodes a guy called Daniel Priestley.
Mm,
One of my favorite podcasts, actually, because I never come across his content before, Daniel. And he says inside of it uh, that your environment dictates performance.
mm,
So,
that's good.
yeah,
That's
your
good.
environment dictates performance. And I'm kind of
Mm,
thinking, okay, how does that relate into like real life so that it's relevant for most people?
mm,
Uh, I, I live at the moment on the Gold Coast. It's a big regional town by the beach.
mm,
But people are, the vibe here is it's quite casual, right?
mm-hmm,
People
mm-hmm.
live at their own pace. I lived in the capital city of Australia in Sydney for many
Oh.
years, like 15 years, and I recently moved back a couple of years. And in Sydney, it's a city vibe, very fast
Mm-hmm,
pace.
mm-hmm,
And when I went down there a couple of months ago, I went into the city for a meeting, and people were just flying past me everywhere, like walking the city. I was like, damn, people are moving. And then
Cities.
everyone's on their phones, and then and I remember that's what I was like every time I would come back to the Gold Coast from
Mm,
Sydney.
mm,
I would be flying past everyone that was walking around here, right? And
mm,
then so when I come back to Sydney, I'm at everyone's pace, right? I'm just at
mm,
everyone's pace. And then when I come to the Gold, but now that I've lived on the Gold Coast and I move back to Sydney, my pace is a lot slower, and I
mm,
notice it because the people are just zinging past me left, right, and center in the city. So the way that I kind of look at that is like, yeah, if you spend time long enough in one particular area or where you're living now, you kind of flow with the vibe, right? So that's the performance is the things that you do, but it's dictated by your environment. Like that's really what it is. And then you go into a city situation where if you live there long enough, you kind of again go with the flow that everyone's going at. Do you know
mm,
what I mean? Like how fast people walk or what they do, because you're just kind of molding to the environment.
mm,
You're kind of bringing yourself. So I think that's like a practical way. If you want to be able to step outside of your comfort zone or your bubble,
mm,
first you've got to find communities or environments that are talking about the things that maybe you want to be doing, whatever that
mm,
is, whether that's in sport or you want to try something for exercise or something physical or business. I think you need to just get into groups
right.
that are talking about the things that you want to be doing,
Mm.
and
And
then
like,
you'll kind of assimilate to them.
what were some of the like, I guess like what are like some of the ways in which you've seen salespeople actually create things apart from, so like, can you give me like some examples of like ways in which salespeople kind of stepped out?
Yeah, launching their own offers.
Mm-hmm,
There's a lot of knowledge, and it doesn't have to be just sales training, but
mm-hmm,
it could be anything that maybe salespeople struggle with or need help with.
mm-hmm,
It could be managing finances. It could be your routines as a sales professional, being in remote space and getting together with others, because even when we go remote, we're very isolated.
right.
Um, do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things other than sales training that people can offer,
Mm-hmm,
and it doesn't have to be just salespeople that you sell to. It could be your previous experience
yes.
that you've had, to kind of sell to as an audience. So that's one
Big shout
way
out to
to,
Rachel.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
and so there are those things to think about, and then there are um, opportunities as an entrepreneur. So being
Mm,
on offers that you see potential in. Uh, to see opportunities outside of just being on sales
mm,
calls all day, where you can maybe create or suggest creation of new products, suggest the direction of where the leads are or how you can make it better, and then get compensated for that
yeah.
as well. You don't necessarily need to do it for free,
Mm,
but if you're consistently trying to better find different ways on how you can help grow the business, I think you stand out from everyone else who just clocks on and off the calendar.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's some probably like the easiest and most practical ways to get started. And the other thing is, with business, there's marketing, sales, and fulfillment. Most people listening to this in sales, they've already got the middle piece, the sales part.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll just partner with a marketer or someone who already has pretty good fulfillment and marketing, and you
Mm-hmm.
just your piece is the plugin for
Exactly
that.
right.
It's an easy way to get started in JVs. But yeah, as far as what you could do practically and real quick, being
Mm-hmm.
an entrepreneur inside the organizations that you're already in to help them grow,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out how you can help people on a one-on-one basis, not just in sales, but anything else outside of that, are probably the
Exactly
quickest
right.
path.
Exactly
Yeah,
right. And this is something that you can do at any level, guys. Like, you don't have to reach.
absolutely.
This is something that I've been constantly combated with over my journey. It's been like, going back to what Patrick said a bit earlier, it's like, am I the person to do this? You can do this at any level, any stage. Sometimes the reality, as a matter of fact, I remember having a conversation with Brad Newman one time,
Mm,
and I think it was about 2 years ago, a year or 2 years ago. And I was like, man, I need to now find me another offer. I need another offer to work with. And I remember, clear as day, he said to me, he said, let me ask you a question. He said, are you a W-2 employee or are you 1099? That's like a rando question. Rando question, man. I said, I'm a 1099. He said, then why are you thinking like an employee?
mm,
He said, instead of constantly falling into the trap of just trying to find new offers, why don't you create something of your own? And I think that we're not saying that one is better or worse than the other. What we're saying is that there are options, there are opportunities that you can explore as an antithesis to just doing what every other salesperson does, which is hopping on offers, multiple offers, trying to stack offers and all those other kinds of things. There are other alternatives available for you to begin to apply your curiosity and creativity to kind of make these things work. And there are resources and people. Here's another thing too that I've just come to discover is that there are people out there who are willing to ally, is that the word? Ally? Connect,
mm,
connect with you to kind of help you
mhm.
get where you need to be. And sometimes you need to find yourself in a position where you're just in the environment. Like for me, one of the things I found, being with the collective is just the value for me has been just being around these individuals, like just absorbing the
Mm,
atmosphere, just like, and the challenge of like this is being done. A lot of times the questions that you'll ask about how to do this will just be answered just by being around in an environment. There's this
mm,
idea. It's just like there's some things that you can be taught to do, like there are skills and things that you can get, but then there are things that you can just catch. You can just catch, and just by being around a certain kind of person, just like the unconscious lessons being transmitted. I think that's one of the
mm.
undervalued resources about being around a really, really good, strong group of people.
Yeah,
Um, Let me ask you this, Patrick. I know we're a bit over time now.
that's cool.
But good. That's good. That's good. As a matter of fact, once upon a time, no. So like, let me ask you this, like, for someone who is, let's say that they are desiring to be a Preeminent Pro, like they're in the process of building their reputation, they're building their personal brand, and they're kind of on the cusp of a breakthrough, and they're
Mhm.
looking to try to do something different. Like, what words of encouragement could you provide them with?
um, don't talk yourself out of it. you know, Definitely. If you're on the cusp of something, usually that's when you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's
Mm,
new. So that's when all this overthinking and imposter syndrome can start to kick in.
mm,
Especially if you've been working on something, maybe you've been thinking about it, and you feel like, yep, I found my direction. Um, I think there's a turning point where you either do it or you don't. And I think
mm,
that's the pressure that you need to put on yourself, because if you sit on the fence with it, and this is what my wife told me when I was trying to make a decision to leave, my corporate role.
mm.
She said to me, you've been sitting on the fence for a while. It's got to be hurting between your legs, right? um, Shout out to my wife.
Shout
Um,
out to the wife.
yeah. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It is.
It's
It
so
is
good.
starting to
So
kind of hurt
good.
a little bit. So you got
So
to. I
good.
think it comes to a point where you do have to choose one or the other. Um, so if you go the path of not doing it, you have to be okay with not doing it, and you just got to stop thinking about the what ifs, or I
Yes.
should have done this, because that's going to
Yes.
eat away at you. So if you're not comfortable doing that, then you should just do it, and
Yeah.
then say, I tried it, didn't work, I'm moving on with my life. I
Yeah.
think that's a better position to be in, and I'll take the lessons, you know,
Yes.
by
Yes.
going down that way. Where am I going to learn the most from in my journey of evolution? Like if I'm at a point where I'm at that precipice of doing something, or I'm close to making a move,
Yep.
um, I think if you do it, you'll learn. That's the worst case scenario, is that you will learn, right? Yeah, maybe you'll fail, but you'll learn. That's the underlying factor on it. If you don't do something, you
Mhm.
always think, what lessons could I have learned, I guess,
Yep.
and you just don't know.
And the pain of
So
regret is real. I forgot who
totally.
it was. I forgot what book I was reading. And it was just like, I think it's a book called Chop Wood, Carry Water. Love that
Mm,
book. And he
heard of it.
talked about the idea that, like, a lot of people, it's a lot easier to take the risk than it is to deal with the regret and the ramifications of not taking the risk.
Mm, yeah,
So
yeah,
for
yep.
example, it's easy to just modulate your sugar intake than it is to now deal with diabetes later on,
Yep,
right? It's
totally.
easier to set aside a certain amount of income than it is to deal with the ramifications of not having a job and now wondering where the money is going to come from. Does that make sense?
Mm,
So it's like
yeah.
the pain of regret, uh, the pain of regret and the ramifications of not taking the risk are just too great.
Mm,
I would just kind of like piggyback off of that and just be like, trust yourself and give yourself the permission to fail. Right.
mm,
But here's the kicker. Chances are you probably won't.
mm, yeah, yeah.
You've been stewing over something that has been well thought out, and you just need to just do. You just need to do
Mm,
now. Right. And even if you do fail, chances are you have a great story to tell.
yeah. Yeah, that's part of your personal brand, right? I think that.
Ken Honda was on a podcast. He wrote this book called Happy Money. And he said, if you, the guy asked him, I forgot the podcaster's name. And he said, if you were to give any piece of advice, what would it be? He said, uh, take a risk so big that when you get old, you can look back on it and laugh about it.
Mm, yeah, I love it. I love that. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
That's so cool. You
I
don't
said
laugh at
that's
the
pretty
time, but
good.
later you'll laugh.
No,
Yeah.
you definitely don't. You definitely don't. You definitely. Oh, that
Yeah.
was terrible. That was terrible. Terrible thing to do. Oh man, that was
I
good.
love that. That's so good.
So
Okay.
if people are listening to what we have to say, like, you know what, this is inspiring to me, and I want to get around a group of people. I want to be able to kind of learn some of these more practical things to be able to kind of start my own thing and do something different, maybe kind of expand my awareness. Like, how can they find out more about the collective and connect with you?
Yeah. If they're listening and they're from Facebook,
Hmm.
and they're connected with me, you just have to reach out. Probably the easiest.
Hmm.
But otherwise, if you go to jointhecollective.com, the
Hmm.
collective without the E,
Hmm.
jointhecollective.com, that'll lead you to all the information. There's a 2-minute video explainer that kind of shows everything that we do within
Hmm.
that time. That's probably the best way. Read through the copy, and if it resonates, then we can have a discussion. Probably the best part, and my favorite part about the collective is, um, it's not a grow at all costs type of
Mm. Yeah.
community. I open and close it, and we've got, as we're recording this, we've got 72 members, and I've spoken and vetted every single person that's come in.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a hard sell by any means.
Exactly right.
You just have to be a good fit.
Yeah. I remember when I went through the process. You provided a lot more value than you did like ask for anything. I was just like, this is
Mm,
really, really cool. I like this. Let's do
yeah.
that.
You're member number 4. Yeah. Know
That's
that?
right. I
Member
would have been
number
number
4.
one, but he didn't come to me first.
Yeah. 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 You were on day 2 of my calls. Yeah.
Let's see.
which is really cool.
But I think that this has been an amazing conversation. I look forward to doing more with you because there's so many things to kind of learn from like your journey, your experience, and hopefully you'll get a chance to return again if you like.
Mm.
You have an
Yeah,
open door
oh,
here with
absolutely.
me.
Yeah, I love
Um,
it.
but man, to all of you guys that are out there, if you are, on the fence about, doing something great, or you're at a point right now where you're not ready to do something great because you're still building your reputation, I want to kind of let you know and kind of encourage you that every day you're building your own house. Every day you're building your own house. And either at the end you'll be satisfied and excited about it, or you'll wish you had done something different. Choose every day, every moment that you do to build yourself into the best version you can. And until the next time, remember, exponential growth comes from being preeminent, standing out, but being incremental comes from being mediocre. So choose preeminence, and I will see you guys the next time. Bye bye.
Thanks, Pierre. That was really good, man.